Hey guys, welcome back to the Tukes and Tires YouTube channel. As always, I'm Zach, and this week we're installing a Winter's Performance quick change rear end in the C1 Chevelle.
Hey, is that Timmy's?
Yeah, because we're in Canada. Alright guys, so you already heard what we're trying to accomplish in today's video. So you can see that we got the Chevelle on the hoist because it's just going to work a lot easier for us to be able to get underneath it and cut out what we have to cut out. So you can see we got the deck lid off here, and you can see I've been procrastinating on taking this old gas tank out of there just because I like how rusty it is, even though we're going to be changing it. So I think the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually get that out of there because we're no longer going to be using it, and there's some bars that are going to have to be cut out to, I think, fit the new rear end, that quick change that we're going to be putting in, and the other gas tank just isn't going to work with this configuration. So we're going to get that gas tank out of there, and then I'll actually get everything set up that we got to put the rear end in so we can show you guys all that stuff, and then we can actually lift the car up in the air and see what we need to do to actually get that thing to fit in here. So I'll get this out, and then we'll show you everything that we got. Alright guys, so we got that gas tank out of there now, so hopefully once we start cutting back here that we're not going to blow up, even though you can already see that we were cutting and welding new bars back here, but hey, you know, you gotta live a little. So it's a little hard to see back here on what's going on and why this car is so cool, but once we get it into the air, you'll be able to see that a whole lot better. But the C1 Chevelle actually has truck trailing arms in it from a 60s era Chevy truck. And they did this back in the 70s when they built this car. They actually modeled it after a NASCAR of that era. So it's super wicked, and I don't want to change any of that. It has load bolts on it, so you can change the suspension. So I want to save that, but I want to adapt this quick change rear end into the car. And obviously, if you don't know about a quick change, holy Toledo, did you see that? Lacey was riding on it. But if you don't know about a quick change, basically you can change your gears under 10 minutes, and you know, that's what we want to do with this car, be able to go from like race to street. So I think that's going to be super cool. So what we got to actually adapt this into the car was some truck perches that are from that era of truck. You can actually see that the hole is offset because those actually go on an angle underneath the car. These were like 30 bucks off of Amazon, so if I need to modify them, you know, no biggie if we got to cut them out just in case they didn't put those trailing arms in the right angle in the car. We've got some Heim joints here to make up a new panhard bar, so that hopefully is going to work out pretty good, or a right and a left hand, and then we have a new bar that we're going to cut to length once we figure out the perches on the rear end and stuff. The panhard bar that's in the car right now actually goes behind the rear end, but we need to change it due to this humongous cover hanging off the back of this thing, so we're going to end up going over top. So you'll see that once we actually get underneath the car and we start modifying stuff. But I think what we're going to do now, we're going to get the car into the air, see what we need to chop out, and then we'll see if we can actually get this huge honking rear end in there. Lacey, you going to help out? No, you're just going to destroy stuff. Alright guys, so we got the Chevelle in the air now, so you'll be able to see this whole trailing arm setup underneath this car. It is just way too cool that they went through all the work to actually fit this thing underneath this car. So I can't wait to be able to test out what it's actually capable of. But where we're going to start is we're going to actually start just chopping out a bunch of things. So I need to get this old panhard bar out of there and the support to actually fit the back cover back here. So we are going to be doing a new panhard bar up top, like I said. But other than that, we're not going to be changing much about this suspension setup. I do need to fix the plates that are on top of these springs, just because they need a little bit of love. But other than that, we might change out some hardware so it's nice and new. But we do have an issue actually with the quick change, just because me and Dad were looking at this thing yesterday, and I was like, is this thing bent? And you know, with some measuring, we did find out a problem with it. So nothing wrong with that side. It's nice and straight, well, as straight as it probably could be, but this side we do have an issue. So if I take this nice long straight edge here, we put it right there, you can see we have quite the gap. And obviously measuring all around this tube, it does work out that this side is bent. Not a huge issue. I do have a new axle tube on order, just because you can see that this actually comes out of here. So I've never replaced one of these before in a quick change. This is my first ever quick change, but you guys are going to see that later on in the video. But I do have a lot more work to actually get done on the car to actually make it accept this rear end, so we're going to get to that first. and then we'll see about fixing up this quick change. So let's get after it. Alright guys, so we got that rear end out of there. It was a little bit of a fight just because how everything kind of worked out. We ended up having to use the acetylene torch to actually heat up those trailing arms to get the bolts out. But you know, it came out here. I'm going to salvage the studs I put into this rear end. We're going to use those on the front just because there's nothing wrong with those. So we're going to do that here. And then we can actually come in here and clean up everything. I obviously just got stuff kind of hacked off and whatever, just to make room to get that rear end actually out. So now what I think I'm gonna do, maybe off camera, I do have to move, I think, these two tubes. So I'm gonna get those cut out of there, and then after that, then we can get it all cleaned up, and hopefully we're gonna be fixing up that rear end. And yeah, then we can see about maybe mocking it up in here. So we'll come back to once I got a better game plan of what we're doing. Lacey, where are ya? Friggin' just woke up, didn't ya? So just been going like crazy, tidying up everything back here. So you can see that we got some bars chopped out of here. So I got the lower one chopped out. We got the upper one stubbed off with some supports made under there. I've just been cutting and making tubes like crazy. Figure you guys didn't need to see that because it was some pretty simple stuff. But the only reason I left those is because there's actually supports that come down that support that back cowl piece underneath the rear window. So I think that's looking pretty tidy. I tried to make this look as nice as possible for where the old bracket came down for the panhard bar. And then we also chopped out an extra bar that was here for the old gas tank mount, and I moved it actually forward because I want to put my gas tank into this rear section, and it'll make it a whole lot easier for actually slipping it in through the rear trunk area. So we got that cut up and made, so it's looking pretty sweet under here. But there's not much left I can do underneath here right now because I'm still waiting on that axle tube. I could fix those upper mount things for the shocks, but I want to leave this all intact until we get the perches at least welded onto the axle, and then we'll start messing around with that. So I think what we're going to move on to now is actually making up the tower that would be for the panhard bar, because we're going to be going over top of the axle with that. So I'm going to make up a, I don't know what you want to call it, perch bracket that's going to come up here so that we can actually get nice clearance over top of this pot. And then I'll also make up the bracket that will be on that tube work back there. So I'm going to start making up some templates out of ram board, get those cut out of what they're going to kind of look like, and then we'll actually come back and maybe we'll start cutting them out of steel. So once I get, once again, a better game plan, we'll see what we got, and then we'll go from there. Alright guys, so we got our templates made up here. You can see this one on this side. I'm not a huge fan of how tall this is, but I don't want to put a curve into our panhard bar. I want to keep it straight just for keeping it obviously easy to fix if we're on the road. So this might be a little bit taller than what we actually need. So that's better because I can always obviously cut it off the bottom once we're actually making the steel one. But this is what we're going to make for now. This will obviously allow enough clearance over top of this axle over here, or the pot. So it is what it is, but we can't obviously weld that on until we have this into the car. And then the thing I made for the other side, it's just going to be pretty simple. It's going to have some adjustability with different holes and stuff, and that's obviously going to go over here onto the frame. So we're going to actually get cutting these out of steel, and then yeah, we'll obviously just we'll come back to once we're actually fixing the axle, because after this, that's all we got left to do until we can actually get it into the car. Freaking Lacey here though. Look at her. Jeez. Just helping out. Alright guys, so we got our brackets made out of steel now. So this one's going to go over here on the passenger side. I have a little gusset that's going to go over here. Hopefully that's going to do something. I have no idea. I just kind of made it. Hopefully it works. And this is going to be the other one that's going to go onto the frame side, or like the tubing that's in there. I haven't drilled any holes yet just because I don't know where this one's going to be placed. And it's just going to be some, I think, 3/4 inch holes that we're actually drilling into this. So nothing too crazy. But you can actually see we got some stuff in the mail. So I've been waiting on this stuff for like 2 weeks now. I got a new axle tube. So we're actually going to be tackling that next. Me and Dad are going to see about getting that thing installed. And I also got this Detroit locker. Found this on Facebook Marketplace. It was a pretty good deal. Right now we have an aluminum spool in there, so for street driving I don't think that's going to be too good. So while we have it apart, we're actually going to throw this thing in, so that's going to be super cool. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to get this thing, I think I'm going to bolt it to a tire just so that it's going to be tipped upright, because that's kind of how we have to go about it for putting the center section thing in there. But we're going to get the bell off. We're going to get the oxygen acetylene torch. We're going to see about sweating that axle out of there, and then we'll see if we can get the other one cut to length and see if we can get it in there. So here we go. Alright guys, so you can see that we got it bolted to a tire now. I've obviously never done this. This is my first quick change rear end. But going off of stuff I've seen online and just peeking in through the fill hole, this is going to be the ring gear side anyways, due to this ring gear lockout. We are going to be using this to check our backlash later on. So we would have to take this side off anyways to put the new center section in there. But what we're going to do, we're just going to get all these bolts cracked off. Hopefully this bell will come off, and that's what we're going to see. So we'll put you on time lapse, and then yeah, hopefully we find what we want to find. Alright guys, so we got that side off. It actually came off really easy. I just gave it a tap and it just popped right off. So we are going to take the seal out of here just so we don't mess that up, because we are going to be putting some heat into this. But I don't know, the races look pretty good. There's like a little bit of sludge buildup in here from obviously them using it for racing. Not too crazy, I don't know. I wouldn't say, you know, I wouldn't be worried about it. But what we're going to do now is we're actually going to lift this out just to see what it looks like and to see if we are right that this is a spool. I would definitely say that that's a spool. So looks actually in really good shape. I don't see nothing wrong with that. But you know, it will be nice to get that Detroit locker in here. So just for now, I'm going to stick this back in. There's not much metal shavings in that fluid, so I think we're pretty good there. But what we're going to do is me and Dad are going to heat that up, and we're going to see if we can actually get that axle tube out of there. So that's pretty wicked. Alright guys, so I don't know how this is going to go, but we're just going to see what happens. So wish us luck. Alright guys, well there we have it. We got the tube out. I can definitely see this one's bent. I took some persuasion, got the clamp on there so I can get some like good reefing force on it. The race did fall out, so we're gonna let this cool down so that way we can you know, obviously handle it. We're gonna measure the length on this. I think I'm gonna add about a 1/4 inch just to make my axle the hub face a little bit better to what I want. But that didn't go too bad. Not too bad. We didn't light the magnesium on fire. Alright guys, so this is cooled down now so I can actually touch it. This is our new axle tube. I bought this longer. I think I had about 3 inches to spare. I wasn't overly sure how much longer I was going to make this, so I figured, hey, might as well get it longer and we can cut it off. So I've already cut it off. I marked 5 inches because that's the depth that this goes down in. So it's still a little warm to the touch, so we're going to see on how this goes, if it's going to slide in there. Oh. Oh. No, I think we're going to have to heat it up, Dad. Not going. We're going to have to heat that up. So it looks like we're going to have to heat it back up. It's shrunken down. No biggie. We're going to just get her going here. I don't think we're going to film that just because it's going to be the same process as what we did before. So we'll come back to once I actually have this all the way down. Alright, so we got that new axle tube in there. It wasn't overly hard, so you can see that was my 5-inch mark. And we are all the way down. You can hear it's making contact, so that's super cool. So we're going to let this cool down. Then we're going to see about actually drilling and tapping the holes for that. I think we have a tap here. We'll show you that once we get to that point on what it is. And then we can see about putting the race back in. And then we'll actually see about maybe getting that Detroit locker in there. But this went a lot easier than I thought for our first time. So that's super cool. So we figured before we do anything else, we just wanted to show you how bent this is. So you can see Dad has it here at where it would be actually in the bell. And you can see that we have at least a 1/4 inch gap, if it's not more. So this axle tube was like super bent. So hopefully this new one is going to be, you know, brand new. It should be hopefully straight. So yeah, and I think it's bent, it was bent 2 ways. So it was like down and back or something like that. So yeah. Good thing we're changing this out so that we're starting off fresh. Man, look at that. Look how crooked that is. Crazy. So got these holes drilled and tapped into this axle tube. I figured you guys didn't need to see that just because obviously it was just drilling some holes. But the tap size we used for that was a 3/8 24. You guys probably can't see that. And then we originally drilled it out with a 21/64 bit. I actually busted that off on my second hole I was drilling, so I ended up having just to use the little end bit, but hey, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. I did throw some RTV on here to when I threw them in, so hopefully once they cure, they're actually gonna hold these bolts in there. I have no idea what the torque spec is for these bolts, so I just kind of snugged them up by hand, so hopefully those are gonna be alright. And we ended up getting this race back in there, we pounded it in, but I did want to mention, I'm just like a regular man, and I did not read the instructions, but apparently you are not supposed to torch this. Apparently you're supposed to heat it up in an oven to get it up to temperature to actually take it apart. But I don't have a crappy oven to do that, and I don't think the folks inside would like me stinking up the house with this thing. So it is what it is. You know, it doesn't look warped or cracked in any way to me. it's going to be a learning experience if anything happens with it. So I just wanted to put that out there, you know, do as I say and not as I do, but hey, you live and you learn. But Lacey, what's happening? We did get the Detroit locker put together here, so we just got the spool split off from that ring gear, so it wasn't anything too crazy, but I do know the torque specs for these. This is, because it's a threaded ring gear, these are supposed to be set at 60 foot-pounds, so we did like 31st, and then we did them in a star pattern, and then we obviously finished it off with 60. I did throw some Loctite onto there, so hopefully that's going to be alright. So all we got to do now is we got to get the other bell onto here to check backlash. So I'm going to get this thing set up for that, show you guys kind of how we're going to go about it. Obviously this is my first time doing this, so hopefully it's going to go all right, and we'll talk about if you have to change your backlash, how to shim this thing. So we'll come back to once we're a little better situated. All right, guys, so we got this other axle tube bolted on now with the bell, so I figured I'd walk you guys through on kind of how we're going about checking the backlash. So I did buy this little bag of shims here that you can buy from Winners Performance. Basically how these go on, we'll show you over here on the spool, is you would shim this in between each bearing. So it's kind of a pain in the butt, but you know, it is what it is. That's kind of how it goes together, just because you are sandwiching the case together. So what you're going to want to do is you want to take this locking pin here, and you're actually going to lock out the ring gear, so that doesn't let it move on the inside, and then you can check it on the spline shaft sticking out on the back here. So obviously you got to take the cover off. We made up just this little angle iron for our gauge to go on here, so we could see how it's going to move. And this measurement is supposed to be in between 4 and 6 thousandths. So I'm going to get over here. Dad's going to kind of move this, so hopefully you guys can see that. So we're calling that it kind of looks like 6. It might be a heavy 6, but the gears are old and they're worn out. So we're going on that's the reason why we're getting 6. And I didn't have to change any of the shims, obviously, because that Detroit locker already had shims on it, so we're calling that good. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the back cover on. I still don't have a set of gears yet for this, so I still have to get a set, but we can get this back together and we can finally see if it's going to be nice and straight and throw it into the Chevelle. So here we go. So we got the hub back on there, the whole thing's all put back together, everything is torqued to spec. We still have to throw some gears in the back, but I figured for now, that way we can actually spin this around, because I am going to have to measure for a drive shaft. But we got these perches like I think we already showed you. So these are going to go on there. But I don't know if I showed these yet. These are going to be the U-bolts, and the best place I found those was actually from Speedway Motors. So I don't know if you can see the part number there for those, but it's kind of hard finding a 3/4 inch round U-bolt, and obviously I want to make it as strong as possible, so that's what we're going to throw in there. So we're going to get this thing into the air. Me and Dad are going to try to get this axle underneath the car and try to get it in there. But now we got the gas tank, so we're going to be fighting that. But we'll come back to once we have this kind of on the hoist, and we're going to try to lift it into place. Alright guys, so we got the axle under here now, up onto the hoist. It wasn't too bad. We just had to lift the hoist just a little bit to kind of slip it underneath the bumper to get it in here. So what our plan is we're just going to lift it up on top of the trailing arms, and then afterwards we're going to slip the mounts in. So hopefully that's going to work out. Me and Dad are going to get underneath both sides, and we're just going to kind of try to lift it and go over. We're going to let this kind of tip down here, obviously doing with our gas tank now and everything here, so we're going to see how it goes. All right, Dad, you ready?
Yep.
And what side are we putting our heads on? Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Just tell me when.
Okay, it's going to want to swing, right?
Yep. You good?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm good too. Yeah, it's going to want to swing down. Okay, hold on. We'll do one side at a time. You got a bolt? Just for now. Okay. And then we just got to do this side. You ready?
Yep. Oh, shit.
You want to hold that balance?
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, so now just don't let that smash your head. Alright, maybe just let it down slow.
We'll just have to prop that up.
Yeah, maybe if we even just take a strap or something and hold it up for now off of one of these back bolts. But hey, it's in there.
Because you're gonna have to center.
Yeah, we're going to center it. All right, guys, that didn't go too bad. We got it in there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to center the axle to the frame. There's not much that's straight on this car, so that's kind of what we're going to have to go off of to actually put it in there. We're going to tie this up just for now. And then once we kind of get a little bit more situated, we're going to actually have to check out our pinion angle. But so far, this is going pretty good. All right, guys, so we spent some time measuring this, trying to get it as perfect as possible. Obviously, yeah, this car wasn't a couple bangs in its day, so, you know, it's not 100% straight, but I think we got it to where it's going to be pretty well perfect for what it is. So we have it centered on the frame for where the hub face is. It doesn't look too bad on the body. The body's crooked, so it makes it look a little funny, but, you know, it is technically straight to the front tires. We've measured in a cross pattern, and that measurement works out the same. And I've also got the pinion angle set here with ride height on it. So if we get a line on here, give me a second, guys, if I can just figure this thing out. So I set the front at 3, and the back here, I think we got her, it's like pretty well just a hair over 3. So that's not too bad. So I think that's where we're going to call it. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to get this thing basically tacked in, and then we can actually start messing around with our bracket for the panhard bar. So I'll set you guys up on a time lapse and we'll get this thing burned in. See what's going on. So you can see that we got our brackets all welded on here now, and that went pretty sweet. It was a little tricky to get in here to actually weld the perches just because they are on an angle. So you saw that we got the rear end tipped up to do that when we were welding it, and we got this bracket on here for our panhard bar on the rear end. But what we're going to move on to now is actually figuring out the other side of that bracket for that bar. So you can see that we already have this tube that we made up here, or bracket I should say, and we kind of took some measurements on how we figured out where we need to put our first hole into this, because we haven't drilled it yet. So what I did is I took a straight edge on the hoist over there, and then I took a measurement from this side to where that first bolt hole is on this side here for where the heim joint is fixed on the rear end. And I had Dad actually hold this bracket onto the framework over there, and we marked our first hole at the same measurement up. So we're trying to aim to make the panhard bar level at ride height. The rear end right now is pretty much at that. We shimmed it with the blocks and everything just to try to make it as easy as possible for doing this measurement. But if we are a little off due to our situation with the load bolts there, we can actually raise and lower the car just a little bit to get our bar where we want it. And I'm going to drill a couple multiple holes into that just in case we ever do want to lift the car up. Right now we basically couldn't go down anymore for where those plates are. That's okay. I like the ride height it is at now. But if we want some more adjustment, we're going to add that into that bracket. So I'm going to start drilling some holes into that, and we'll probably come back to once I'm actually welding it onto the frame over here, and we can figure out the bar to go in between. Lacey, you can help out? Yeah, probably not. Like always. Alright guys, so we got that bracket welded onto the frame there, and it actually went really nicely. I was able to actually weld around all the sides on those 2 pipes, so it should be nice and sturdy in there. I don't think we get any issues with it anyways, because the panhard bar is always going to be pushing into it. But you can actually see we got our heim joints up in there with the bar. I already cut it because it wasn't anything too crazy. But what I'm going to do now is actually take that out of there, weld it up so I can get those heim joints nice and straight. And then we'll get it back in here and show you guys. And then the only thing we got left is actually to put the quick fill onto this and throw some gears into it. So we'll get that made up and I'll show you what those 2 things are. So here we go. So we got that panhard bar all welded up and it's holding the rear end in here really solid now. I actually took my temporary little bar off, so if we have to make any adjustments with this left to right, we can actually just shorten or lengthen this panhard bar because that is a right hand and a left hand one. But I think it's pretty good at where it's at, but we'll do some final measurements once I get the tires on there and stuff so that we can see it a little bit better. But what we're actually going to move on to now is installing this quick fill. So if you can see this one little AN fitting actually coming off the side here, you have to fill this rear end in 2 parts. So there's the back section and the front section. Over time, fluid would get into both parts, but you fill the section where the ring and pinion is. Lacey, you're really blocking the camera view here and the light. How about you come over here? There we go. So you have to fill them separately, but obviously if you're only changing out the gears, you're only going to be filling the oil in the back section. So that's what this little AN fitting is for over here. So I have the quick fill for that, and this also acts as a vent. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to mount this up a little bit higher. I actually have a great space in between the gas tank here, so I think that's where we're going to put it. I just bought a 90 fitting just because it's going to work out a little bit better for me so that the fluid will actually run a little bit down on an angle. So when I bought this rear end, well, when my buddy bought this rear end and I bought it off of him, it came with this quick fill. So all I got to do is maybe shorten up this AN line that came with this thing and see about getting it in there. And then, well, after this, we'll see about throwing our gears into the back. Lacey, you're acting like you're working on this car, huh? Alright guys, so we got that quick fill installed and it's looking super sweet, so hopefully we have enough angle on that hose for the fluid to actually drain into this gear section on this rear end, but we actually got to throw a set of gears into it right now, so I figured we'd talk about why this thing is so cool and the advantages of a quick change rear end. I actually bought a set of gears online. I'm not going to say from who, but they showed up wrong, and I was kind of in a little bit of a pickle because, you know, I wanted something to throw into it right now so we could actually start moving the car around. So huge shout out to the guys over at Blue Collar Performance. They reached out and said, hey, we can throw a set of gears your way, so I really appreciate it. So if you are looking for any work in the southwestern Ontario region for your hot rod, or you're looking for parts, definitely hit those guys up. I'm going to leave a link down below in the description for their page, so huge shout out to those guys. But we got a set of gears here. So a quick change rear end is pretty wicked because you can either go to a high or a low gear on the same gear. So the ring and pinion that's actually in this rear end is a 486. I think they come in a couple different ones, I'm not too sure. But what you're doing is you're actually changing the ring and pinion size by changing the gears in the back. So what we have here is on the high side is a 627, and if we were to change it on the low side, we have a 376. So we're going to get this back cover off here, and you'll be able to see kind of what's going on back here. So we've already drained the fluid out of this thing, so I have a little bit of bucket down here, but if you were to take that cover off, a whole bunch of fluid would come out. And then we have 2 spline shafts in here. So this one actually comes from the drive shaft, and then this one goes to your pinion side. So all you got to do is you take your gears here, and if we would want it on the low side, we would just take our big gear, put it on the bottom, and we would take our small gear and we'd put it on the top. Takes a little bit of finesse kind of getting the splines all lined up, but it's just that easy. They say you can change your gears in less than 10 minutes, so that is, you know, pretty wicked if we're going to be changing this a whole bunch of times. There's a huge selection of gears that you can actually get. So for now, this is what we're going to be running, but maybe down the road we might get something that's a little bit better for highway driving, and maybe something that's going to be, you know, more aggressive if we want to do like autocross. But say we wanted to go to the high side to make this a 627, you literally just throw the big gear on top, put the small gear on the bottom, and you're laughing. So we're gonna get this thing cleaned up and get the back cover on, and I think that's where we're gonna end off this video. But man, this quick change has been a journey putting it into this car. Well guys, there we have it. We got the back cover back on. I put a little bit of RTV on there just because I'm paranoid, because I don't want it to leak, and I don't have a new gasket. But we got everything tightened down. I have no idea what the torque spec is for this actual nut on the back here, so I just kind of did it until it got pretty snug. We did throw some safety wire onto there just because there's holes into that. I have no idea if I put that on right whatsoever. So if you guys know of any good videos of actually doing that, or any other tips for quick change rear ends, definitely comment that down below, because I'm still learning with this because it's my first one. So any information is going to be helpful. We still have some oil to put into this thing. It takes 75-90 weight oil, fully synthetic. I'm going to do that off camera just because you guys don't need to see me put oil into it. It's pretty simple. And other than that, there's not much left we can do with the rear end. I still have to do the brakes, so that might be just kind of in another video. And, you know, it's nothing too special. It's just putting brakes on. But, yeah, I mean, this thing is pretty cool. I can't remember if I mentioned all the torque specs for stuff, so if you guys are trying to find information, you know, comment down below. I'll do my best to try to answer those questions. I think these case bolts, they get torqued down to 35 foot-pounds. I have no idea on the back ones, and then the ones on the ring and pinion, I think you did them at 30 and then 60. Other than that, I don't know any other torque specs for this, so I will leave a link down below for the instructions I read on how to kind of set this thing up. So if you guys are looking for that, it'll be there. I'll also leave a link to the chart for all the gears and stuff like that. So you guys can either check that out, or if you're looking for that information, it'll be down there. Yeah, I think that's where we're going to leave this video. What's coming up next, we're actually going to be doing a really cool exhaust system on this thing, so you're going to want to check that out. And then after that, we just got some wiring to do and maybe a couple other small things, but you'll just have to stick around till next time to see what we come up with. But I think that's where we're going to leave it off. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing, and as always, don't forget to salute the beaver. We'll catch you next time.